video, I'm going to be going through 10 more forgotten prog/jazz rock albums. But prog albums. This is really 10 albums that, on my sort of explorations on this channel, down various rabbit holes, something I've never done before until I've been running this channel, because so many people will say, have you checked out this band, have you checked out that band? And most of the time when I check these things out, it's just generic prog, which, you know, is the only real value of it is that it's obscure, and you think, well, yeah, I can see why this is obscure. But you get taken down rabbit holes, and sometimes people will recommend something and it absolutely blows you away and surprise you that you don't know it. And I did, a few months back, I did 10, you know, sort of forgotten prog masterpieces where I discussed Herman Sabel's, you know, self-titled album, and then I told the story of that. And I think I've been able to actually create a little fan base now for Herman Sabel, who of course is probably completely unaware because he's sat in some sort of ecstatic state in a cave somewhere unknown to the whole world. But that's another story. If you want to know about that, go and check my videos on Herman Sabel. So do I have anything like that in this list? Well, I think I do. I think there are some real strange stories here on this list of 10 forgotten prog / jazz rock albums, or as it will be called, 10 more forgotten prog / jazz rock albums. So shall we get into this? I'm going to play some audio as well because I think it's only fair, which might demonetize this video, but I'm going to play some audio from the albums as well, because, you know, when I'm chatting about Herbie Hancock, well, yes, you know what that sounds like, but in this case you probably haven't heard these albums, so they will get a little blast of each album after I have mentioned them. So I'm going to mention the first one at number 1, and this isn't ranked, it's just 10, because we like 10, it's a nice round number. So at number 1 I have, by the band Mythos, Strange Guys from 1978. So, there we have this album. Right, so Mythos are a pretty obscure krautrock band. I'm not a big fan of krautrock, as you know. I think it's good, and I'm not saying I hate it. I do like it, but I've never been a huge fan of it. But in the world of krautrock, this band Mythos, who were formed in 1969. I'm sorry to have to look over here. Normally when I do these videos, I am using my encyclopedic but sometimes faulty knowledge, which is contained up in here, but with these bands I can't do. So I've got some notes here. They were founded in Berlin in 1969. They were originally called The Lovely People. They disbanded in 1980. They came out the same scene that produced Amon Doll and Klaus Schulze. They were signed to the legendary krautrock label and their first 2 albums, Mythos and Dreamland, are forgotten classics in the krautrock world. But I'm not even going for one of those, because in the late 70s they sort of decided to pull in their style a little bit, and they made 2 albums, Concrete City and Strange Guys. And in this they started using sort of more mainstream pop synth stuff. They pulled the thing in, they started creating songs, and I've got to be honest, maybe I'm just not dark and musically able to get krautrock. Maybe there's something, I don't know if it's on my jazz side. I'd rather listen to Bitches Brew. If I'm going to listen to Avant-Garde, I'm going to listen to Ascension by John Coltrane. I'm not so much interested in that, but I like the idea of it. So when some band pulls it in a little bit, suddenly my ears prick up. And when I heard this album, and what it sounds like is something that's more it's a krautrock take on, I think, the English tradition of prog rock. It sort of brings these two things together. The two debut albums are absolute must. You know, as I've said, for any prog fan, they are great krautrock albums. But these two albums, especially Strange Guys, I think have really got forgotten. I had a really great listen to this album, and I thought it was fantastic. I think sometimes the problem with prog is it does need to draw itself in, and when it does that, it is capable of incredible things, and that's what we have here. Right, so the next album on my list of forgotten prog masterpiece classics is by Michael Mantler, and it's called The Hapless Child.
Oh, Millicent Bradley, is there any hope that she's still alive? Why haven't they found that it's rather ghastly to think that the child was not yet alive? A dear little thing last seen playing alone by herself at the edge of the park. There was no one with her to keep her from straying away in the shadow of the oncoming dark. Before she could do so, a silent and glittering black motor drew up where she sat nibbling grass. From within came a nearly inaudible twittering, a tiny pink face peered out through the glass. She was ready to flee when the figure beckoned, an arm with two elbows held out a tinful of cinnamon balls. She paused a second, reached out as she took one and lifted her ear.
Which was made in 1976. So, recently Carla Bley died. I did a tribute to Carla Bley. I talked about the masterpiece albums that she did with her then husband Michael Mantler, especially the Jazz Composers Orchestra album, which is firmly in the tradition of free jazz, although Michael Mantler brings a compositional aspect to it, right? One of my lovely viewers to this channel has said, Andy, have you checked out, and sorry I don't know who you are, but I'm sure you'll put in the comments this is the case, that you were the one who said it, so I will try and pin that comment if I see it. They said, have you heard Hapless Child by Michael Mantler? This is probably one of the greatest prog albums of all time, and definitely the most doomiest and darkest. I was like, really? Michael Mantler making a prog album? So I shuffle over to Spotify and I put it on. The first thing that hit me was the lineup. Right? The lineup is unbelievable. Right? So on this album we have Carla Bley on keyboards and vocal. Right? We have Robert Wyatt as the main singer on this album, and boy does he have to sing. The vocal parts are incredible. We have the incredible European guitarist, who I need to do a video on because he's one of the great guitarists, and that's Tehei Ripdahl, who has an incredible guitar sound and an incredible approach. I have never heard him in a context like this. This is like full-on dark, depressing, gothic prog, with Tehei Ripdahl not doing the functional role but playing all over this. On bass we have one of the greatest jazz bass players of all time, Steve Swallow, and on drums, one of the greatest jazz drummers of all time, Jack DeJohnette. This is an incredible lineup. We even get, Nick Mason cropping up at one point, doing some spoken word stuff. Right, this album is based upon a series of writings by the writer Edward Gorey. He had a book called Amphigory, right? And I went and checked this book out. These are extremely dark tales about horrible things happening to little children. It like takes the tradition of the Brothers Grimm and amps it up. And this becomes the foundation for the compositional structure of this album, where Robert Wyatt, with his hyper intricate vocal, tells these awfully dark stories, whilst this incredible band weaves their magic through the incredible compositions of Michael Mantler. This, on this list, is one of the real forgotten masterpieces of progressive rock. If you are a prog fan, especially those of you who like it dark, those who like King Crimson and will say Van de Graaff Generator, you will not know what has hit you. go over to Spotify and put in The Hapless Child by Michael Mantler. Sit down and it will blow you away. So that's what I have at number 2 is The Hapless Child by Michael Mantler. Right, what do I have at number 3? Well, again, all these albums have a certain jazz rock jazz tinge to them, right? Some more than others. This album is a band that was formed by a great European pianist called Wolfgang Dauner, and the album is by his band Etc., and it's actually their second album, which is called Knirsch, which was made in 1972. Right, so Wolfgang Dauner, I'm aware of Wolfgang Dauner. He was, I think he was signed to the MPS label, and he was making some incredible European fusion in the 60s, early 70s. He then forms this band, Etc., and they are far more closer to progressive rock, although there are avant-garde influences there, there's ambient influences, noise, whole host of stuff. And this is a band, it's not Wolfgang Dauner. Now, the original lineup was Roland Wittich on percussion, the incredibly young and incredibly great Eberhard Weber on bass, Fred Bracewell on drums, Siggy Schwab on guitar, sitar and sarangi, and Wolfgang Dauner on synths, clavinet and ring modulator, trumpet, flute and a whole bunch of things. This is combining Indian music, it's combining free jazz, it's combining prog. They made 2 albums, right? The first, which I think is just called Etc., I'm not too sure. This second one, Knirsch, has got a different lineup and features on it John Heisman from Colosseum and one of the great, architects of jazz rock, Larry Coryell. And it's got a slightly tighter sound. Again, you'll see I like albums like this. We can all find really extreme avant-garde albums out there. And the first Etc. album is that, and you will love it if you like that. But, John Heisman and Larry Coryell, come in and they pull it in and they give it a sheen that takes it beyond sort of European prog krautrock, because some of this is krautrocky. There's a sort of freewheeling approach to the music which has definitely come from krautrock, but it is its own thing. After this album, I think they did a double live album, but after this album Knirsch, they seem to call it a day. I have never heard of this band, Etc. This album's absolutely fantastic. So that's what I've got at number 3. Is Wolfgang Dauner's band, Etc., and the album Knirsch. Right, so what have I got at number 4? This has been a really interesting find for me. If you go to my playlists, you will find a playlist called Ersatz Mahavishnu, and what this is a bunch of different artists that are in some way influenced by the Mahavishnu Orchestra heavily. It's almost the attempt to create an alternative Mahavishnu album out of stuff created by other musicians, right? That's what I wanted to do. In researching that, I started to explore the music of Brian Auger. Brian Auger is an organist that emerged in the burgeoning rock scene in the 1960s. He is one of the great architects of rock music, right? He had a band called Trinity in the 60s that was pulling together influences which was so important. There was a group of players that predate Cream and Jimi Hendrix and Jeff Beck. People like Graham Bond, Georgie Fame, and Brian Auger. These guys were pulling in influences from blues, pop music, rock and roll, and jazz. They were absolute jazz virtuosos. Brian Auger is one of the great organ players, right? So in that band that he had in the early 60s, on guitar, he had John McLaughlin on guitar. So he knows John from the early 60s, and he's linked to John from those days. So in 1970, John McLaughlin brings out an album called Devotion, and that is going to be an important album in discussing two of the artists on this list, the first being Brian Auger. Because in the early 70s, Brian Auger stops making the sort of quite pop music that he was making at the time, and he forms a proggy fusion band called Oblivion Express. And in 1970, they bring out a self-titled album. Now, I was aware of this band, but I assumed it would be much closer to what he was doing in the 60s, but it's not. It is full on prog, and it is full on fusion, and it is mind-blowing. It's an incredible album with incredible playing on there. The lineup on this album is Brian Auger on keyboards, the great Jim Mullen on guitar, Barry Dean on bass, and Robbie McIntosh, the late Robbie McIntosh from Average White Band, on drums. This is a great band, and on this album there's some incredible compositions, very proggy, very fusiony, but they do a John McLaughlin tune. They do Dragon Song. Now this is really interesting because there are two bands here that are taking what John McLaughlin did on Devotion. This is pre-Mavish Orchestra, and pushing it forward. Now I think there are two versions of Dragon Songs on this list, and this is the first one. The version by Brian Auger on the Oblivion Express album is greater than the John McLaughlin one. That's saying something. He has spotted something, and he is in at the beginning, right? It proves to me that there were other artists around in 1970-71 that were exploring similar ideas. Now we can say, yeah, well, he got it from John McLaughlin, but is that the case? Because John, earlier on, was learning from Brian Auger in that band. This is all part of the same scene. So this is very interesting for Mavish Orchestra fans. If you're a Mavish New fan, or a Prog fan, or a Future fan, go and check out Brian Auger's Oblivion Express. Before I move on, I just want to say that when I was researching this, I saw that Jim Mullen was on guitar. Now, Jim Mullen is a British guitarist. He's a fantastic player. I've seen him live a number of times. In the late 70s, early 80s, he had a band called Morrissey Mullen. I've never mentioned them on the channel, but they're one of the great British fusion groups, right? So I've mentioned them. Anyway, up the road from me is a little community centre that used to be a school. As I was writing this, a thing popped up that the great Jim Mullen was playing in this little community centre in my town. And I thought, oh my God, I've got to go to this, and I'm doing this video. I'm going to go over and I'm going to see Jim and say, can you tell me something about this Oblivion Express album that he did with Brian Auger? I looked at the date, and it was one of those things, you know, when you look at the date, so when is it? And it was then. Now it had just started. It was that point. He was there in Kiddie. Now, maybe I should have jumped in my car and driven over and found him, but I didn't. Anyway, I just went to bed and had some biscuits. But that's a little story that goes with this. Don't know whether it's interesting to you. Probably not. Anyway, I'm going to move on now as I go down off on the tangent of talking about biscuits. So let's not do that and move to number 5 on the list. This is another discovery for me. I've known about this band for years, never checked them out. You know why? Because I thought they'd be rubbish. I thought they would be a sort of, you know, ambient new age band, which I think they end up being. And that band is Shadowfax, signed to the Windham Hill label, right, that made a ton of sort of new agey type stuff. Now, they came to my attention because the great Jerry Goodman, you know, the great Jerry Goodman, one of the greatest musicians out there as far as I'm concerned, had done stuff with Shadowfax. I thought, that's interesting. Why is he playing with Shadowfax for? I thought there was some sort of maybe he's doing some sort of new agey thing with them. I never checked it out. I never bothered to check it out. Anyway, recently I came across their first album called Watercourse. But I put it on. This album knocked me out. It's like Prog Mavishnokshtra. The lineup is Phil McGeaney on bass, Stuart Nevitt on drums, tabla percussion, G. Stinson on guitar, sitar, vocals, Chuck Greenberg on lyric on saxophone, soprano, flute, recorder, oboe and clarinet, and Don Malachik on piano, electric piano, synthesizer, moog and stuff like that. What is this? This is incredibly intense jazz rock fusion prog, ornate, tightly composed, but improvisationally coming out of the school of Mavishnokshtra, and it's just absolutely mind-blowing. This album is incredible. Charting their career, you could see after this debut, that sound slowly dwindles away as they move towards something which is much more ethereal. But that sort of ethereal Oregon type sound, you know, Oregon, the band Oregon, which I absolutely love, that is in this band as well. So imagine taking the Mavishnokshtra and melding it with Oregon, and then on this album passing it through a whole ton of prog, and that's what you have with this album Watercourse by Shadowfax. I wish I could tell you some more, but I can't, because that's about as much as I know. But I've pointed you over there, so go and check that album out. Honestly, if you're a Mavishnu fan, go and check Watercourse out by Shadowfax. Right, number 6 and 7 are two albums that are much closer to home to me, and I'm able to talk about from the inside. So at the top of this video, when it started up, I was playing some music there, and I wasn't just playing some music, there was some video there, and the eagle-eyed amongst you would have spotted an incredible band made up of Marco Miniman, made up of Mike Keneally, and made up on bass of the incredible bassist that is currently touring with Marco in the Aristocrats, and before that was the bassist with I think Joe Satriani and Steve Vai. And even though I know all this about this guy, because I'm getting old, his name's escaped my bloody memory. So I'm just going to have to quickly look. Why can't I remember this guy? I played on a bloody track with him. I'm on a track with this guy. Sorry if he's watching. But you see, I'm getting old. And sometimes, you will know this if you're getting old, that you sort of, sometimes you forget things. But the name of this man, one of the great bass players working today, sorry Brian, is Brian Bella, and his name escaped me for then. Not because I didn't know it, it's just because I was having a senior moment, and it does happen, right, to me every now and then anyone watches this channel. I could edit it out. Shall I edit it out? Okay then. So imagine that never happened. You can edit it out in your mind. So let's start again. So an incredible band featuring on drums Marco Miniman, on keyboards Mike Keneally, on bass the great Brian Bella from Aristocrat Steve Vai Joe Satriani band, and on guitar my close friend Fayan Zek, who I also play drums for. And the album that is off is an album called The Reality is My Plaything. Time to wake, screaming, screaming, be alive. I met Fi in it wasn't in 19, it was in 2006, which is nearly 20 years ago. And when I met him, he was starting work on this monumental epic album. A few years ago, he managed to finish it. It actually took him 10 years to finish this album. This is one of the most grandiose, epic, out there prog albums ever made in the last 20 years. I know it's my mate that's made it, but I am being objective here. Reality is My Plaything is, for me, one of the most outlandish, out there albums that you will ever come across. If you're into a sort of mix of Frank Zappa, Steve Vai, the Cardiacs, XTC, free jazz, techno, all these things and such an incredible band. You know, when he put this band together of sort of Mike Keneally, Brian Bella and Marco Minnan, he'd actually put a band together which was then to go on to play with Joe Satriani. This is a really, really important album. Fi does things on this album that no one else is doing. There is an approach to songwriting, there is an approach to sort of progginess, there's an approach to improvisation, which is absolutely unique. And this album is a double CD. There's like 2 hours of stuff, and there's an extra disc that you can get. There's 3 discs here, 10 years in the making. This is one of the most epic albums ever made. A labour of love by Fi, which it took him all over the world making this album, and reaching out to some of the greatest instrumental performers around today. I played drums a little bit on his follow-up album, the Interdimensional Garden Party, and I'm drumming on his forthcoming album. But I am not plugging it for those reasons. I truly, honestly believe that this is one of the great progressive rock albums, and I'm very proud to be involved on some of the albums, but I am not on this album, so I don't feel compromised in putting an album that I'm on. Go and check it out. So, that is the album I have at number 6. Reality is My Plaything by Fi Janzek. Right, the next album I have on this list is by another friend of mine, in fact 2 friends of mine. It is an album by the great British progressive rock bass player John Jowett, who has played with Arena, he has played with Frost, he has played with IQ, he has played with Uriah Heep, he has played with Brian Ego, and he currently plays bass in my prog band Rain, and I played alongside him in Frost and IQ. You know, my partner in crime. We are the great British progressive rock rhythm section, don't you know? And if you want to hire us, we're there to hire. But the interesting thing about John is prog. He's out and out prog, and I see John every week. If I jump in the car with John and he puts his music on, I never know what to expect. It's usually going to be some sort of house or techno music. Sometimes it's drum and bass, sometimes it's reggae, sometimes it's classic rock, sometimes it's prog. He has a whole host of influences going on there. Now, when I was in IQ, one of the guys on the sort of crew is a musician, guitarist, producer called Mark Westwood, and Mark Westwood helped produce and engineer the last 2 Rain albums. Mark is an incredible guitar player that's also worked with the likes of Clive Nolan and a whole bunch of different people, Pendragon. He's done a whole host of stuff over the years, as well as his own bands. In the late 90s, Mark and John put together an album. It's a one-up album by a project called Dirtbox. and the album is called Dirtbox. When I met John, thinking he was the prog guy, he sticks a CD. He said, "Oh, check this out." And he gives me this Dirtbox CD. A few years later, we're on tour with Frost, and me and Jem Godfrey, the keyboard player, we're travelling through Holland. Now, there's things in Holland that can influence your perception. That's all I'm saying at this point. And with our perception slightly influenced, we were sat in the back of a tour bus waiting to go on stage, and me and Jem decided to put the Dirtbox album on, and it pulled us into a parallel world which is unlike any other. And from that day to this, I have always seen John in a different light. So Dirtbox is incredible. Now, this album's hard to get hold of, but searching around, some dirty rotten scoundrel has actually put it up on YouTube. So go and check it out. But if you want to get a copy of it, I have talked about John about re-releasing this as a digital copy on our Bandcamp Rain, and you never know, there may be some physical copies lying about that we can sell. So if there's an interest, you know, drummed up by this video, and I think this is where I'm doing some good for society, if I can drum up a bit of interest for this project Dirtbox, which I don't think really, you know, in the old days when this emerged, it would have been pushed out to an audience for IQ, you know, so a neo-prog, you know, audience. I think it's a bit much for them. It's a bit out there, and I don't think they knew how to take it. But of course, you guys, you are far more, you know, able to take on all sorts of different chaotic, bonkers stuff, aren't you? You know, the viewers from my channel, I know what you guys are like. I have here, you know, 18,000 people subscribe to this channel that have got incredible music taste, able to take on. I'm buttering you all up now, and as I should. You know, I make a video and then I read the comments and I am aghast at the knowledge. And a lot of the bands on this list have come from, you know, leads or suggestions from you wonderful viewers of this channel. So if you are able to hear something a little bit different, go and check out Dirtbox by John Jowett and Mark Westwood, and I will put a link in the description for this album. And Fies. I'm not going to do it for anybody else's, but I'll do it for my two mates. It's good to stick by your mates, you know, it's a good thing. So, what have I got at number 8? This is another treasure that I think I've found, and I've been listening to this album over and over again, and the deeper I get into it, the greater I think it. When I first heard it, I thought, well, that's really good, it's interesting, that is. But the deeper I get into it, the greater I get it. And this is the closest I have to the whole Herman Sabel thing. This album has so much mystery around it, and I've been trying to get something to tell you about it, and I haven't got that much, so I'm going to try my best. So it's the one and only album by the band Good God. It was released in 1972 and it's self-titled, Good God. If you go and find it, it's got a weird painting of a face on the front. I have made some notes from various websites about this band. Good God was a jazz rock fusion stroke prog band based in Philadelphia in the early 70s. The group was led by the guitarist Larry Cardarelli and Cotton Kent on keyboard. Filling out the band was Greg Scott on saxophones, John Ransom on bass and Hank Ransom on drums. They released one album in 1972 on the Atlantic Records label. It's a major label release with the catalogue number right before Close to the Edge. Right, this is a little bit of a fact. It was released on Atlantic, just before Close to the Edge. Rumour has it the band's got its name when they rang up Captain Beefheart, who they're huge fans of, and said, what shall we call our band? Don. And Don Van Vliet turned around and said, oh, good God. And that's what they decided to call themselves. Whether this story is true or not is not known. So that is what I found out. Now, check out this album, and what you have is this weird jazz rocky prog album. We've got covers of King Kong by Frank Zappa and a cover of Dragon Song by John McLaughlin. This is the second version of this, and it is in the playlist that I will link in to the description of this video. This album's incredible, and the thing that really sticks out is this guitarist, Larry Cardarelli. Now, Larry Cardarelli, I just tried to find something about, because who the hell is playing like this in 1972? Why isn't he getting mentioned? This is incredible stuff. It's not jazz. This is a rock guitarist. It's a bit like Tommy Bolin. But it's not like Tommy Bolin, but it has that vibe. It's a rock guitarist who is highly exploratory and influenced by jazz. I love those types of guitarists. This guitarist is all over the place. You go and check this guy, Larry Cardarelli, out. Now, let me. Where do I start? This guy seems to have an alter ego. Zeno Sparkles? Is this the case? Now, I am putting it out there because I'm sure there's going to be people on this channel who watch this and be able to fill the gaps in. So if you want to know more, check the comments out. But he has an alter ego called Zeno Sparkles, and he seems to disappear off the face of the earth after this album's made. I have read in certain places that he may well have been killed in a car crash. So what we have here is the lone album by Larry Cardarelli. Okay? Going deeper into this, the bass player John Ransom, which is a part of the brothers that form the rhythm section, John and Hank, John was also killed in a plane crash. Is this true? So half this band was wiped out? Right, none of the musicians seem to go on to do anything else, right? I would love to know more about this band, because this band emerges, makes this incredible album, gets signed to Atlantic Records, major label, and I would have thought this album would have rocketed it. It's incredible, especially coming in the wake of the Mavericks Auction. Why did it not happen for this band? I do not know. And this is the great mystery on this. It's not quite there like Herman Zabel. We haven't got anybody living out in caves and all that type of stuff. But last time I was able to get in contact with Michael Vizzeglia, who was the bass player on the Herman album, and he was able to fill in some facts which I think through this channel has been able to tell the story of that album. I would love to tell the story of this album on a future video. So has anyone got any leads down below? So let's see where we get. Right. So the next album, number 9, I have, because I don't talk about this scene enough, it's the Canterbury prog scene. And I thought, let's pull an album out from the Canterbury. Now, this album by Egg is absolutely fantastic. The lineup is Dave Stewart on organ and piano, electric piano and bass, Monty Campbell on bass, vocals, French horn and piano, and Clive Brooks drums. Right, there is a guest appearance by the great Steve Hillage on Ring Out of the Ground. Right, I think Steve Hillage was involved in a band that sort of laid the foundations for this band, Egg. And of course, Egg then laid the foundations for Dave Stewart, coming forth as one of the great prog composers and keyboard players. He made my top 10 prog keyboardist. He's an absolute genius, and I'm a massive fan of Hatfield in the North. I've never really listened to Egg. Going back to this album, you have here this compositional style which is at once incredibly dense and heavy, but light and English, and does not reek of pomposity, which so often weighty, heavy, you know, proggy, hyper composed and arranged music, you know, complex music can have this whiff of we're better than everybody else. The Canterbury musicians, especially Dave Stewart, I think, were able to create incredibly dense compositions that have a whimsy. Chick Corea could do the same thing as well. I would love to know how much of a fan Dave Stewart is of Chick Corea, because I see there seems to be they're similar. If you check out like the Leprechaun, that's like an American version of Canterbury, the Canterbury style, especially Egg and Hatfield and North. And I hear it in Dave Stewart's music. I wish I could talk more about this. I'm not that knowledgeable about Egg. But going through this album, this album blew me away. It's a trio, but they seem to play everything on there. But it's basically organ, bass, and drums. There's no guitar. Now you could say that should have commercially held them back, but it didn't hold the LP back. This is way better than the LP. Egg, Civil Service at number 9. So I've come to the very last album, and I've got something that I've just never heard of here that I've found. And it's an album by a band called Solution, and the album is called Diversion from 1972. Now this album is the second album by this Dutch progressive rock group. It was released in 1972 on the EMI, the EMI subsidiary Harvest Records, that, you know, put out a whole ton of incredible prog. I don't know much about this album at all. I just don't know anything about this band, so I'm going to read out some notes I put together. They founded in 1970, they disbanded in 1983. They reunited for 2 shows at the Club Panama in Amsterdam in 2006. So there's obviously some following them for them to be able to get back together. The founder members were Tom Bardage on saxophone and William Ennis on piano, and they had played in a Dutch band called The Keys. This was a sort of jazz rock and soul crossover band. They then changed their name to Solution in 1969, adding the drummer Hans Waterman, who had been in the band XQB and the Blizzards. I'm just reading this out, it doesn't even make sense what I'm saying. XQB and the Blizzards. One half of the musicians wanted to play songs and the other wanted to improvise in jazz fashion. Soon the band split, and Barlage and Ennis and Waterman formed Solution. Right, so this is a band, it's a bit like Gentle Giant. They've sort of come out of a soul crossover, you know, world, but they want to push the envelope, and they do. The band signed to a small label, Catfish, and were joined by Peter Van Sande on bass. The quartet recorded their first self-titled record in 1971, and the influences on that record was sort of Frank Zappa, Soft Machine, John Coltrane. So we're in that sort of European take on almost like sort of the Canterbury scene that we were just talking about. On their second record, Diversion, the band signed to EMI's progressive subsidiary Harvest. Gus Willems replaced Van der Sande on bass. Willems brought not only a rockier side with his semi-acoustic Hofner bass, but also became the singer from the band. Divergence is as good as the first record, with a punchier side and a more pronounced soul influence. This is cool stuff. This is really incredible. Very proggy, very soul-y, very funky, great vocals. This is a great album. Great cover. I love the cover. I think this is a great album that was noticed by a reasonable label. Some production was put in and they were able to do something. Of course, nothing came of it after that. So, those are my 10 more forgotten prog stroke jazz rock classics. I'm sure you're all classics. I'm sure you're all going to scamper off now and check out the stuff there. And I would love to hear what you've got to say about it, and I'm expecting a lot of knowledge and wisdom from you, because I'm hoping to follow up some of the stuff I can find out with you little detectives out there doing that for me, and so I look forward to that. If you want to support me, the way you can support me is by sticking a like on this video. It helps the algorithm, it helps the channel. Right, so please, if you're not going to do anything else, go. I know you sat there watching it, you probably liked it. All you're going to do is get your little mouse or your little finger and you're just going to reach and just go bing like that on like. It won't hurt you. It's not going to do anything, but it will help me. So please do that. And if you want to see more, subscribe. That helps the channel as well. And if you want to support me, you can pop over to Patreon, where there's tons and tons of content. And it's not just videos of me talking. There's a whole mass of stuff on there. But if you haven't got the time to support me in that way, but you still want to give me a little bit of cash, which is really helping me in terms of, you know, getting this channel up and going and turning it into something that I can do more, you can support me by sticking a little bit of money in the YouTube tip jar. All the videos this week I am dedicating to my brother-in-law Grant, who died sadly, actually, at filming this video last night, around about midnight, he died. He was only 50 years old, so I dedicate it to you, Grant. I'm going to do that all week. Real horrible thing. I'm in here. I'm trying to keep the channel going, and I'm trying to, you know, I'm coming in and filming a whole bunch of YouTube videos so we can keep it going. But behind all this is this, and it's an awful thing when these things happen. So anyway. Grant, I hope you can hear this. I hope you're sitting down watching it, and I hope the fact that you know, there's lots and lots of people thinking about you now that are watching this. I hope that means something. It's the least I can do. Anyway, thanks for watching, and see you on the next video.